Okay, so what I'm going to do now is to take you on a tour of Canterbury. We're going to go and visit the cathedral and all the other highlights around the town. This is Canterbury Central. This in the evening gets very busy with people going out and eating and drinking and just cafe culture. So very much so in Canterbury. We have lots and lots of people who visit. It's possibly the second most visited place after London. It has 3 World Heritage sites and it draws tourists in from all over Europe and beyond. This is Canterbury Cathedral. Why is it important? Why is it the mother church? It's because this is where Christianity was established, first of all in the United Kingdom. About, when was it? 597 AD. It was a pagan country at this point, except that Bertha was Catholic. And Augustine was a missionary, and it was him who established the first church here. The king and the queen gave them this plot of land to build his first cathedral. The reason why Canterbury Cathedral is so famous, apart from being the mother church, is because in 1170, that's about 1,000 years ago, there was a murder in the cathedral. And it was the murder of the Archbishop of Canterbury, a man called Thomas Becket. Now Thomas was a friend of the king, okay? And the king at the time was someone called Henry II. There are lots and lots of Henrys in English history, but this was Henry II. And Henry II was anxious about the amount of power that the church had. So he thought, why don't I put my friend Thomas Becket in charge of the church in Canterbury, and then that means that he can do what I want him to do, and in effect take power away from the Pope in Rome. And that's exactly what happened for a little bit of time, except that Thomas became, in his role, more spiritual, more devout. And eventually he began to fight with the king. And for the next 7 years or so, they were bitter enemies, absolutely fighting tooth and nail about every little bit of ecclesiastical power. And then eventually the king said one day, he said in front of an audience of people, he said, "Who will rid me of this turbulent priest?" Which means, who will kill him, basically. Did he mean it? Who knows? Who knows? But 4 knights said, yeah, we will. And that's what they did. They came to the cathedral and Thomas was praying. It was the 29th of December, 1170. They asked him to come out, he refused. They took their swords out and they cut his head open. There was blood everywhere. This was huge. This was a John F. Kennedy moment. The whole Christian world knew about this assassination. So news spread everywhere. And in effect, what happened was that Canterbury Cathedral became, and it was before, but became even more a site of pilgrimage, to rank as number 3 after St. Peter's in Rome, Santiago de Compostela in Spain, and then Canterbury Cathedral. Let's go and take a look at a bit more of it. The first date you have to remember is 55 BC, before Christ. And that's when the Romans first came to these shores, okay? Julius Caesar, he arrived at Dover. He had a good look at Dover. He thought that there were rather too many inhospitable people around. So basically he got back on his boat and went to Gaul. Then he tried 1 year later in 54 BC to come to England, and he sort of got to the shores, came up over the cliffs and met a couple of people. He networked with a king called Mandubracius, and Mandubracius and him, they got on quite well, and he established a few trade links. But then, you know, he looked at the weather, the people still weren't very friendly, and he decided he'd hot-foot it back to Gaul again. The wine was better, the women were better looking, I don't know. And then it was 90 years later when Claudius came in 43 AD to Canterbury and set up a real Roman town here. So Duo Vernum Cantiocorum was established, and for the next 400 years the Romans were here and they built a fantastic little city. And I'm standing on the site of a Roman theatre. Okay, as you can see, it's changed. And this is because in 1942 there was a bombing raid on Canterbury. Now what had happened was that we, the Allies, had bombed Dresden and Lübeck, terrible carpet bombing. And in response, Hitler wanted to bomb some of the historical towns of England. So he chose 5 towns from a guidebook, in fact, and one of those towns was Canterbury. And a third of the city was bombed, was destroyed, and what you see behind me is that third of the city, including the arcade here. Fortunately, the cathedral was not destroyed. It was damaged, but it wasn't destroyed, and that's because we had people on the roof of the cathedral, and when the bombs came down, they were incendiary bombs, the people on the roof threw them off onto the ground. So Canterbury Cathedral effectively, and thank goodness, was saved. Butchery Lane, and no prizes for guessing what went on here. In medieval times, this was full of butchers, full of meat, full of cows being slaughtered. And a little while ago I talked about Rome, and Rome is 2 meters under my feet. But standing here on top of that are lots of carcasses, bones, skulls, all sorts of things that have gone into the ground, because what they did, these butchers, was that they threw the animal bones out of their shops onto the ground here, covered the ground with a little layer of wood chipping or sawdust, and then they threw some more on here. So it's compacted now, and if you want to get down to Roman Canterbury, well, you'll have to go to the Roman Museum, which is just along here, because digging, you're going to go through a lot of bones before you get to Roman Canterbury. So that's it, we've come full circle around Canterbury. We've only just scraped the surface, so we can go around again and do all sorts of different stuff. But I hope you've enjoyed it, and hope to see you back here again soon.